I want to show you how to make the easiest pie with just 3 ingredients. And it all starts with a pre-made pie crust. Pre-made pie crust is so easy. Yes, I love to make a homemade pie crust, but the frozen ones that are already prepared in a pan, or even the rolls that you can defrost, unroll, are just as good as a homemade. I mean, yes, I said it. I said what I said. It makes it so easy to make pies, especially really quickly when you don't have the time to make a homemade crust, make sure it's the right consistency. If you want to have a project and take the time, great. But if you have a party to get to and you want to bring a homemade pie, take the pie crust shortcut. I'm gonna start with just blind baking this. I have my oven preheated. I'm just gonna dock this with a few forks to the bottom. This will prevent it from puffing up. Blind baking will give this crust a head start, so when this filling is ready, it's not gonna really make this pie super soggy. Just gonna add this onto a sheet pan. I like to do this when I'm baking pies because once that filling goes in there, it's a place to catch any drips. Alexa, set timer for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, starting now.
Thank you. While that's baking, I'm gonna start in our filling. So easy. About 4 cups of frozen cherries. I'm using cherries, but go ahead and experiment with any frozen fruit that you would think would be good in a pie. Now I'm gonna add about a cup of sugar. We're making a pie, we're gonna sweeten things up. And then about a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. That'll collect all those juices and turn it into a nice thick sauce. Now just let that filling warm up till it's nice and juicy and bubbling. You don't wanna boil it, just let it simmer and thicken until we're ready to add it to the pie. There is our crust, blind baked. So it's still pretty raw, but just a little heat will set the outside so that filling doesn't make the crust soggy. And then we have our filling. It's bubbled up, it's thickened a lot. I love frozen cherries because all they are just cherries frozen, nothing else added. So no preservatives, no additional sugars. It's gonna be way better than a can filling. And even though we're taking a lot of shortcuts with this pie, it's still homemade. I feel like Sandra Lee would be proud of me. So the second this starts to bubble and thicken, you wanna remove it from the heat. You don't want it to burn or scorch or get too thick. We need a little bit of that juice. That cornstarch will thicken up and that transformation happens really quickly. So keep an eye on it and keep that heat kind of low to medium low. That's a nice sauce, nice gooey, glossy cherry filling. And then do a taste test just to make sure it's delicious. These are delicious cherries. And you can do the same thing with fresh cherries. You'll have to pit them and do all of that. But hey, if cherries are in season and you wanna do fresh cherries, go ahead. So you could do a double crust pie, maybe take the extra time to do a lattice. And you can still do that with a pre-made pie crust, just those sheets of pie dough. Just roll it out, cut it into strips, lattice it on top. I'm doing an open top pie, but take the extra time if you wanna put a little bit more of a homemade stamp on it, you can do a double crust. All we have to do is put this back in the oven so the crust can finish baking, the pie can get all gooey and bubbly, and then we're ready for some delicious cherry pie. 20 to 25 minutes later, we have a finished pie. And this couldn't have been easier. That filling came together so quickly on the stove, and with that pre-made crust, I barely had to do any work, just blind bake it really quickly. This pie looks gorgeous. It looks homemade. Anybody would be impressed by this. Now, the other trick you can do is if you get the pre-made sheets of pie crust, you can bake it in a nice pie dish, so it definitely will have that homemade look to it instead of this metal tin. Or you can transfer this pie crust if you're really careful and want to give that a try. And like all those classic movies, you have to let this sit, let it cool a little bit, put it on the windowsill, and then some cartoon character will come by and steal it. That buttery crust smells so good. Nice dark cherries. For an added touch before you start serving, you can just dust it with some powdered sugar, and that'll give it just a little bit of contrast to that dark cherry, a little extra sweetness. Beautiful! A little light snow. Some whipped cream, some ice cream, or just enjoy a slice of cherry pie. Homemade, mostly. Another easy thing, just while I'm thinking about it, get some seasonal cookie cutters, like mini cookie cutters, and with that pie crust, you can stamp out in a pre-made pie crust some shapes like leaves or anything that's seasonal. Bake those on a cookie sheet until those are cooked through, so you bake them separately, and then you can add those on top. It's the easiest way to decorate without having to learn how to do a lattice or put a pie crust on top. You can just bake separate pie crust shapes and then add those on as decoration at the end. For a pie that was so easy to make, this is so tasty. No one's gonna know about all the shortcuts. That pie crust is flaky and buttery, and those cherries are perfectly tart, perfectly sweet, so good. Try this easy fruit pie recipe out with your favorite fruit.